Yeah, yeah, it's 9%.
Oof.
Okay.
Setting up our meeting on YouTube.
Okay. Well, no rush. Take your time. By
There
all
we go.
means. By all means.
No, there
No.
we're live.
Okay.
Wait, no one's
Okay.
on
Yeah.
yet. Oh, one's
If you
watching.
if you're on, say hello. That
Bless
was
Jen Price. She came on so
that was the
quickly.
fun. That was the funniest thing when you said at that time. And there was nobody watching, and you said, "If you're on, say hello." I'm like, Mary, there's nobody watching. That was when you had your good days and your bad days. You still do, actually. I'm just thinking, fix a stupid thing. It's set up here. That's cool. Anyway, so all good, all good. God, it's a brisk one today. Cold
Yep.
walk this morning, Mary.
Yep.
What I do for you and Oliver Otis Howard.
We hadn't been up there for coffee for a while, so it was
I
nice
know,
to get
I
up
know,
and it
I
was
know.
kind of, I don't know, for me, the history nerd in me it was pretty cool to be up there and know that 160 years ago, the guys that, like the 73rd PA in Howard they're in Savannah, you
Yeah.
know,
Oh,
because the March to the Sea has been completed. Oh, hi, Bill. Hi, Ben. Hi, James.
hey, everybody.
Yep.
That is true. That is true.
Edscorn's on here.
Oh, what's going on? Edscorn, the king of the BMI. Sharp
David
himself.
Maxwell, happy belated Jeff Davis got Savannah Day.
Oh yeah, yeah. This is the time of year. A lot of stuff's going on now. Um, that's we did a whole thing not too long ago with the March to the Sea. We're going to be doing another one.
Yeah, we
Mary,
are.
very
Yeah.
excited. We're going to have another author join us. We have a guy who Somewhere Towards Freedom.
Yeah.
Is the name of the book and has. So that'll be cool. We'll talk about
It's
that
the book
later.
is coming, just for everyone on here, the book is coming out. I think it's being released in January.
Yep.
And Simon and Schuster were really awesome and sent us an advanced reader's copy, but then they sent us the finished edition too, which was pretty awesome.
January 25th, and it was Bennett Parton. He'll be with us. Well, like we did the other day.
Yeah.
We're gonna have another author. We don't do a lot of authors, but apparently we're doing a couple in a month, so that's okay.
Yeah.
But that's okay. That's okay. But anyway, get the machine going here a little bit,
Yeah, I just want to make sure I get his name right. Bennett Parton.
Bennett Parton, not kind of like Dolly Parton, but an E.
Yep. So yeah, it's called Somewhere Towards
Freedom.
Freedom.
You know what Dolly Parton got married?
Yeah.
Ringgold, right?
Yep, she did.
Yeah, Ringgold, right? Ringgold Gap, right at the old train station. Well, not this train station, but yeah. So even Dolly Parton's got silverware.
Yep.
So it's all good. It's all good. You awake yet or what?
I am. I'm just typing the kid's name or the author's name so that I don't get it wrong. There. So anyway, Caleb likes your hat, and James asked if Santa was a cavalryman.
I think he would have had to have been. He's right. He's sort of riding reindeer and riding horses. That's kind of why I got the cavalry thing. But
yeah. So this book is about how the March to the Sea was a large emancipation event as well, like for the African Americans in the South, because so many of them joined. And he has a really good introduction where he explains what he's going to do with it. And it talks about how what happened on the march affected what was going to happen, some of the Freedmen Bureau policies. And I'm suspecting, I don't know, he might talk about this in the book, I'm only a few pages in, that because of being on the March to the Sea, Howard saw and witnessed a lot, obviously, with these African Americans, that helped him to create the policies that the Freedmen's Bureau came up with. Would be what he witnessed, because Bennett talks about in the introduction, he talks about this one African American couple that all along the march they would always look for their daughter. And it was just, I remember the discussion we had with Dr. Colby about that too, that there was the Freedmen's Bureau one of the things they did would help find people, get families back together. And there was the one story you talked about where it wasn't the woman actually wrote to Howard and said, I need help finding my.
Yeah, there was a lot of that. I mean, we talked about that when we had Colby on. It was almost like that couple of days after 9/11 in New York City, where people put those photographs on their for their loved ones on the subway. Have you seen my son? Have you seen my daughter?
Yeah.
That's kind of how it was. I mean, one of the greatest challenges, in his book, was enlightening in a lot of different ways, because a lot of these slaves were not allowed to practice their religion in a group because they're afraid of insurrection. So they started to create their own churches, in which you still see remnants of it today. Even you see a predominantly African American church that comes out of Reconstruction too. But that's good. So we'll be doing a little bit more towards that, I guess, and get some Sherman involved with that. I know you like Chuck Sherman. Fire.
Sherman and fire. I mean, admittedly, yes, I mean, I'm very much still Western theater, like, and I'm much more comfortable studying that. And March to the Sea is actually one of my, I'm very interested in it. And so this book, when we got it, I was like, wow, this is perfect. And I think it'll be like, so far, it's a great story. Like it's good. It's just an interesting perspective that hasn't been talked about a lot was
Hmm.
this emancipation aspect that happened on the March to the Sea.
Hmm. Yeah, no, that's a big part of it. I mean, it's a huge part of it. I mean, and it's part of the war. People don't like to talk a lot about that stuff, but
No.
and like they don't want to do about politics, and that's the whole thing
Mhm.
too. And somebody, what the hell was it? Somebody was talking recently on social media. I know of all things, but about
Shocker.
about politics and not being influential. I mean, where the heck that way? I dreamt it. I suppose someone was talking about. No, someone was talking about it
Yeah.
somewhere, and I don't. I mean, really, the whole thing is politics. All of
Yeah.
war is politics. When you look at the, sure, it's not as sexy as talking about, about Pickett's charge or the mule shoe or the cornfields. But as far as battle goes, but when you talk about some of the political machinations that took place,
Mhm.
right, heading into how they led to these things, and we're going to be doing an episode this week on the Trent Affair,
Yeah.
which is all politics. And you know what's so funny was when you look at, and not a lot of people study that. In 1861 is a fascinating year because things were not going too well for the Union. I don't know if you knew that, Mary. Things were not going too well in 1861, right?
Yeah.
And for all the first Manassas and all that stuff they talk about, it was really the diplomacy with England and France, with Queen Victoria and Napoleon III, because you're England, Europe was a powder keg, right? But they were
Yeah.
finally settling down to that period of detente, right? Italy was getting ready to unify. Germany was getting ready to unify. France and England just got out of the Crimea War. All this stuff's going on. They're like, okay, catch our breath. Now there's this freaking American thing going on. What the hell are we going to do about this? And that Trent affair,
Mhm.
it was this close, that
Yeah.
close to causing a world war with England and France.
Yeah.
That close.
And it
And
doesn't get studied a
no,
lot.
it doesn't, because if you and the hero is William Seward,
Yeah.
and people don't, Seward, all blah blah blah. If it's not the William Seward, if you don't have the adult in the room, there is almost a 100% chance we go
Yeah.
to war with England over that,
Yeah.
because it's War of 1812 in reverse,
Yeah. He
right?
was probably Lincoln's best cabinet member.
No,
I
no,
think
no.
like Seward was like, he's like, I really like him. Oh, Kevin, Merry Christmas from the Queen City we was saved. Yes, Merry Christmas, everybody. A few people
Oh
say
yeah,
Merry
Merry
Christmas
Christmas.
on
Yeah,
here.
exactly, exactly.
We do have a question from Bill Etzkorn. He said, did any other Union generals do anything for the Freedmen's Bureau, perhaps one that ran unsuccessfully for president? Funny enough, I think Hancock was part of the Freedmen's Bureau. Not part of it, but did something with a governorship.
Well, he was a military governor
Yeah, he was a
in the South,
military governor. So he had to he would have known like the
and
policies
he,
and
and he
stuff.
and he set up the Krispy Kreme in New Orleans. Oh shit, was that out loud? No, but seriously, no, but no, they all had an aspect to it. They all did.
Yeah.
But Howard was the one who carried the ball. I mean, he really, really did.
And I think I think he had people likely that had fought with him in the war as part of it too. And the Freedmen's Bureau, I need to look into it more, but there was some level of corruption in there, shockingly. And that was it was basically the lower down people that were doing it. But Fernando Wood went after Howard for it. And that's ultimately why Howard was sent out west, because of the downfall of that. Now, Fernando Wood, he did not like Howard, and it was to do with the fact that Howard was an abolitionist. Fernando Wood was not. Fernando Wood is the one that wanted New York City to secede from the Union.
Oh yeah.
He's the one that is brilliantly played by Lee Pace in the movie Lincoln. One of my favorite characters in that movie that I love to hate, but he just had this vendetta against Howard and just went after him for the corruption on the Freedmen's Bureau. And it was that was kind of the front to, I don't agree with what you're doing with the African Americans.
No, there's with all that stuff, there's a certain, again, it's in all real time. I mean, Howard was kind of he was on his own for a big part of that too,
Yeah, he was not supported by a lot of the generals in the Civil War with the Freedmen's Bureau, sadly. William T. Sherman, one of his good friends, basically sent him a thoughts and prayers letter like, you do you, this is not going to work though.
Yeah, absolutely.
He did, and obviously with Lincoln getting assassinated, that did not help. Johnson was not going to uphold what the Freedmen's Bureau was doing, and Howard knew he was going to have a struggle with it.
Yeah.
And that's the thing. And he talks a lot about it, his time in the Freedmen's Bureau in his memoirs, and he does not hold back. It was a terrible time
Yeah.
for the people that worked for it, and also obviously for the African Americans too during Reconstruction. But he does not like, he is very brutally honest. That's a tough part of his memoirs to read.
Yeah.
Just because
No,
he talks
no, it
about
is.
all the like the death threats against members of the Freedmen's Bureau. Like there was people that they would go to be teachers at the schools that were set up, and they would be driven out of town. The death threats to their family. If you don't pack up and move, we're going to kill you and your whole family. Like terrible stuff.
Mm-hmm.
You know.
Yeah, no, it's true. It's true. But yeah, but we'll talk all that stuff. We'll talk about Trent. We'll talk about that stuff, and it's just fascinating to see how close a lot of things were. But yeah, because it would have been something. Because you look at Lincoln's cabinet, all of them.
Yeah.
Gideon Wells, Simon Cameron, they were all doing hamstrings. They were so happy about this capturing Slidell and Mason.
Yeah.
It was only a couple of adults in the room were like, I don't know, Davey, this man. And Lincoln finally sobered up a little bit, because the English they were not happy about that, Mary. They were not, and there was rumblings of war. There was a lot of stuff going on with that. I mean, Palmerston was pissed off. Charles Russell was pissed. They were all Victoria. It was, you know, and it's just, it would have been interesting because don't forget too, you know, Palmerston. We'll talk about this in the episode. He was putting men on boats to sail to the Northern Atlantic to protect Canada.
Yeah.
Which I always thought was the funniest thing in the world. The English assumed that the South was going to win, not even a question. And so we think to recoup, I mean the British, they're going to recoup Canada, Ontario, Newfoundland, to take back the land they lost. And they were fully prepared to go into that.
Yeah.
You know, it would have been interesting to see what happened. But England, all they required was basically an apology.
Yeah.
For the most part, they wanted some reparations. Didn't really happen. They got an apology, but that could have gone bad, and it would have been interesting to see how that would have happened. You know, because don't forget too. I mean, there was, you know, you had people like Prince Albert, but he dies early December of 61. So the English did. The Trent Affair happens on November 8th. They don't even find out about it until around Thanksgiving, our time, you know, late November. So it's, you know, Palmerston is going in front of his cabinet screaming war, 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 war. Yeah. You know, it's funny how life works out sometimes. But I think what was interesting about that is how badly Lincoln in the cabinet misread that.
Yeah, except for Seward, which I agree with Kevin. Kevin says that Seward is Lincoln's de facto chief of staff, basically. Like he is, he's probably got the most experience of any of them. I think Seward would have made a great president too. I just like, he's so intelligent. He had a great friendship with Lincoln as well. Barbara asked if this is related to the Trent Affair. She asked if we took the guide exam, and she heard the Trent Affair was on it, and we did not.
No, we did not. But it sounds like some people probably didn't brush up on a lot of things like the Trent. No, we did. We just, I mean, I would have loved to, but there's this we had just moved down here, and there's so much going on. We're still trying to get settled. So I don't want to have to deal with that. Maybe next time though. I got some other stuff cooking I'm going to work on, but for the most part, I'm going to worry about that later. But the Trent Affair was on it, and they did, you know, and they did tell people, you know, it is going to be more than just Gettysburg. It's going to be the politics, the pre, the post, other theaters, other wars. And I maybe some people didn't take that seriously, but I know our friend Michael Lentz did, and he I don't think he got the Trent Affair question right, because but I think
they were surprised that it was on there, but it makes sense that it's on there. And for me, I have no plans to ever write the guide exam. I love studying Gettysburg, but like I said, I'm more comfortable in the Western theater. I would, you know, just like, nope, never going to write it. I don't think, but kudos to anybody who does. I know I wouldn't.
I think it's great. I think it's great the park does it. They take it seriously. I think, and we've said this a million times, is you have to be doing it for the right reasons, right? You have to do it because you want to do the tours. But again, everyone does it for their own reasons, and good for them who did it. I'm glad to hear some stories. I'm glad to hear whether it was hard, but yeah, I think if you're going to be out there doing a tour at any of these battlefields, you know, some family from Iowa may ask you, hey, what about this Trent Affair? What was going on? And I think because of the battles that took place in 61 and things were getting set up, Lincoln's calling up 300,000 guys, and everything's going forward, you know, heading into 62. the major event was the diplomacy.
Mhm.
And everything that what Seward was trying to do was to keep England and France separated, keep an
Yeah.
arm's length. And Jeff Davis misreads the whole situation too, because he
Mhm.
thinks there's a romanticism about the Civil War rebellion, so that the English are going to, because everything going on, they're going to kind of embrace that. And the cotton thing they misread too, because if you're heading into secession, what do? It's like
Yeah.
if you have if a bunch of taxes are going up on January 1st, okay, what are you going to do? You're going to buy your stuff now.
Yeah.
So the English had a surplus of cotton that slowly dissipated as it went on.
Yeah.
But the North was a big supply, was a big importer of British finished goods.
Mhm.
So they weren't going to burn that bridge either. And so there's a lot of politics. I think that the problem, what killed the Confederacy politically at the beginning was they had nothing set up.
No.
Right. They didn't have any history. They didn't have a lot of it, but they did have a government. They did have
Yep.
Congress. And that's why Victoria gave them belligerent status,
Yeah.
which pissed off Seward. You can only
And
imagine
Lincoln.
him wearing his big kimono sitting there.
I love that scene in the Lincoln movie
You
where
know,
he's got the big kimono on.
but because
just real quick, what flag is this?
that's the Confederate flag.
This is a Confederate one?
That's one of the Confederate
okay.
ones. Yeah, and then the Union one's next to it.
Oh yeah. Okay. Yes. Now I see. Yeah. Because I got asked if that was. I was going to say like, no, it's not.
Yeah. There's another one that people say that I don't want to hang up. So that's decided to go more of the traditional one. So, but yeah. So there's a lot of stuff going on in the war leading up to that. And again, 61 for the most part for Washington was moving chess pieces around. Yeah, you had fighting, you had McDowell, you had McClellan, you had a lot of stuff going on, but it was more okay. How are we going to keep England from and France and the rest of Europe recognizing the Confederacy?
Yeah.
But belligerent status, if you know what that is, it's a step in that direction. It means that we recognize you not as a country, but as a viable fighting force that has to live by the international laws of war. So it gives you credibility. And Lincoln and Seward are like, well, they don't deserve that because they're a rebellion. But then England's like, well, you know what? They have a president, they have Congress, they have a capital, they have an army. They don't have history, they don't have tradition.
Yeah.
But we're going to do this because we want to make sure you guys fight fairly.
Yeah.
And of course, Seward's like, you got to be shitting me with that, because he thought that was a step in the right direction for recognition. Which would have been another thing too, is how it set up the Trent Affair was by giving belligerent status, it gave both parties the abilities to send envoys to Europe on behalf of their side, which is what led to Slidell and Mason. And Mason's the grandson of George Mason. Yeah. And the thing about him is George Mason, I don't know if you know your American history, Mary, okay?
But some stuff.
But he basically said, paraphrasing, that slavery will be dealt with in this country likely with blood. That was a quote. He said, now his grandson is a hardcore secesh, fiery there, fighting for all that. There's a certain irony to it too.
Yeah.
So it's you could see the fears of what was going on internationally because you're playing that whack-a-mole game.
Yeah.
You're fighting a war. You're trying to bring up veterans. Volunteer soldiers. Meanwhile, you've got this powerhouse England and France sitting watching. And France is like, well, I don't think we want the Americans to build a navy that's going to challenge the balance of power to England, because that's going to lead to a problem. Mm-hmm. And of course, they did with the ironclads. And so they started to put them on a more national level. And so there was so many eyes watching it. But that's what's great about the Trent Affair, because it was like they were living in a powder keg, right? Mm-hmm. Giving off sparks, to quote the great Bonnie Tyler, right?
Yeah.
And all they needed was one event to light it and blow the whole thing up. And Captain Wilkes catches those guys, brings them back, ships them up to Boston, puts them in jail without any sort of tribunal. The North is woohoo. Mm-hmm. They declared November 8th, 1861, a second 4th of July.
Yeah.
That's what the media, that's how excited they were about this. And they were just being tone deaf. And it almost blew up on their faces.
Well, they were so new to it all, but I think Seward kind of had that experience, and was able to take a step back and look at it. Just want to say, Leonard's on here, said, Merry Christmas from the Gibraltar of the Confederacy, Vicksburg.
Vicksburg, yeah. I heard there was a battle there on the time of Gettysburg. Is that true, Leonard? I heard
there's some guy named Bowen involved in it. We're going to get the gallant Bowen.
Frankly, that sounds made up.
The gallant boat.
No, but it's pretty funny. But yeah, but there's a lot of stuff going on, and that's why it's important. Like going back to that guide exam thing, is you want to stop basically. Um, you want to be able to study more and you bring more into it.
Yeah.
And that's
Well,
kind
I
of how it
think
was.
what's important for me with studying Gettysburg, and, MJ says like it helps you engage a broader story and connect to those at Gettysburg when you're giving tours. But the thing for me is I like to, I think people forget there is an aftermath of this battle and what's happening in both the Army of Potomac and the Army of Northern Virginia and all the changes that get made. You have Longstreet getting shipped west, kind of like a timeout or whatever, but he goes out west, and that's an interesting dynamic too, because I think he gets out there and he thinks, oh yeah, Bragg's not a great leader. Maybe I can take this over and have the army. And then they don't get along,
Right.
and he gets shipped back west or east, and you have the Knoxville campaign. Leonard said giving tours at Vicksburg required so much more knowledge than just Vicksburg to help contextualize the campaign and siege in the broader picture.
Well, exactly. I mean,
Yeah.
you're giving a tour. And that's the whole thing of the whole thing we just talked about. You're giving a tour specifically about the battle and the war. I mean, you're not gonna sit there and give a tour of Antietam and no one's going to ask you a question about the Maryland campaign, South Mountain, Second Manassas, Shepherdstown, any of that stuff. You're gonna get questions, and so it's okay to say you don't know, but I mean, you can't blame these people to test you on it, to know about it.
Yeah.
But especially Gettysburg, there are too many people we know, Mary, who focus on just Gettysburg.
Yeah.
Gettysburg is the end all be all. The world began on July 1st, it ended on July 3rd. Everything else outside of it doesn't matter. There's a lot of people who do that. But when you look at Gettysburg and if you study the lead up to it, going all the way back to 61, you can see how it all led to that, right? And you can see it especially with Antietam too. You can see the decisions made led up to it, but you have to know a lot of the whole campaign to understand. You have to know Bristow Station. You have to know Aldie, Upperville, Middleburg. You have to know those because it sets up a lot of the cavalry stuff here. It sets up a lot of Lee's game plan here, but his respect for the army. But yeah, and that you have to know. You should anyway. Forget the guidance, forget all that. But if you're going to study all this, you want to study it just to get a good full picture for yourself. If you're reading Coddington for the 50th time, that's great.
Yeah, but you need to. There's so much else out there to read, and like bringing like the West into this and Vicksburg and all that. Vicksburg is one of those campaigns where I think a lot of people just focus on that siege of it, and they don't look as much at the 9 months that are leading up to that. They don't look at, something like Holly Springs or Chickasaw, not Sherman's greatest day at all, or even what's his face? The horse soldiers guy, the cavalry guy. Grierson, yes, thank you. Yeah, Grierson. Forgot his name for a second.
I'm here to help.
I know. But anyway, like when you look at all that, and I know Tim Smith has like, I don't know, he's working on like a big volume set of the whole Vicksburg campaign, which is cool. Leonard probably knows the book I'm talking about. But there's who else wrote the Vicksburg book? Was it the guy that wrote Forrest Gump wrote the Vicksburg book too?
Yeah,
and then so did Donald L. Miller.
Donald L. Miller, yeah.
It's a really good one too. But like you look at how that is happening out there, and you have Vicksburg falling on July 4th, 1863, and then how that leads into getting Chattanooga, getting Atlanta, and then ultimately getting Savannah, going through the Carolinas. And it's just this thing that one after the other. And the whole time they're worried about Nashville as well. They have to protect, like once the Union gets Nashville, they have to hold that.
Of course they do.
Because that's their supply base. Gentilly mentioned says NOLA. Remember when we did that episode and we said we were going to talk about them at the beginning and then we never did?
Yeah, we gotta get to that. We should do that around, Columbus Day or something.
Bill said, love learning about the Western battles. Just listen to your Tullahoma campaign podcast. Oh, thank you. That was a fun.
That was a while ago.
I love Tullahoma.
No, Tullahoma. Tullahoma's great because it's really one of the big three campaigns, in my opinion, for the North, right?
Yeah.
it's obviously Vicksburg. Tullahoma is a huge one, and then Atlanta. It
Yeah.
really is. It really, really for the North. But what's good about that at Tullahoma because it introduces people in a lot of cases to William Rosecrans, right? Where people don't really focus on him because Grant so overshadows him once you get to Chattanooga. But yeah,
Yeah.
it's just Stones River, especially Tullahoma.
Oh, Tullahoma is
Minty Wilder boys, right?
Yep, that's where Wilder becomes the Lightning Brigade, and that's where what fascinates me about that is like you have Rosecrans, and he's like, I'm going to do this campaign, and Halleck is like, of course, Halleck is being Halleck, he's being a pain, and Rosecrans is like, I want to have mounted infantry, and Halleck is like, mounted infantry are useless, and you have Wilder that's like, hold my beer, and I will show you how effective we can be, and you have that one part of the Tullahoma campaign that Wilder did where he came back and no one had been killed. And that's when they were able to use the Spencers for the first time. And Wilder outfitted his men with those Spencers, paid for it out of his own pocket because Washington would not cover it. And then they realized how effective they were, and they paid Wilder back. But that's where you have the beginning of the Lightning Brigade that are going to go on to Chickamauga along with Minty, and they're going to stall Bragg on that first day of Chickamauga. That has its beginnings in the Tullahoma campaign. That's where they had to prove themselves. But the Tullahoma campaign, you asked Abraham Lincoln, it was one of the most brilliant campaigns in the Civil War. Yeah, Bill says Wilder was a madman. Loved learning about him. He and Minty are. I know you like Minty more, and I'm more Wilder.
No, I just think of that first day of Chickamauga. I think Minty. I think he had the harder job, right? Not that he gets Wilder, but he had a great post-war career. He was a mayor of Chattanooga, and we went to visit his grave that time. That was pretty cool.
Yep. Yeah, and it's nondescript.
But all you're talking about, since I'm thinking about Leonard with Vicksburg, was what's funny was you look at remember they tried to do that DeSoto Canal, remember?
Yep.
And it failed, but that comes directly from the experience they had soon before at Island Number 10 when they did dig the canal. So you can see they try one thing, but it worked. It was kind of like, anybody who follows football, there's a guy named Dick LeBeau. He was a defensive coordinator for the Pittsburgh Steelers back in the day. And the reason why the Patriots beat them every single time was because he never changed his game plan against Tom Brady. He did the whole, we do what we do, right?
Yeah.
And they knew what they did. They beat them. Okay, you're not going to change. We're going to beat you. That's how the Civil War was. We're going to keep doing this until you stop us.
Mm-hmm.
And you saw that a lot. When you're looking at Gettysburg here, right? You look at about Longstreet's march, the Counter March. All that was doing was dusting off the playbook of Jackson at Chancellorsville. Then they try the same exact thing at Gaines Mill.
Yep.
Same exact thing. Advance on the wing, echelon attack, wait for there's always so much, and Lee loved hitting the flanks, and he loved of those echelon attacks.
Yep.
Do it until you stop us.
Mm-hmm.
And they felt that Gettysburg was stopped beyond reasonable from their own. They kind of self-inflicted it, but you saw success obviously at Chancellorsville.
Yeah,
I know, too soon, right? But then you saw to get a Gaines Mill Overland campaign, 1864, outside of Richmond.
I think Chancellorsville, my opinion, is Jackson's greatest moment in the Civil War.
Well, yeah,
he's going to rout. I don't care who you are. I don't care if you're friggin' John Reynolds. You were getting routed in that position. It was, Jackson's greatest moment. And, Miranda's on here and she's just joking around, but she's like, why don't people study Jackson more? He's so understudied. And she put angels.
Did you know his nickname was Stonewall? I just saw that. No, of course, but he deserves a lot of credit. But again, he's somebody who probably gets too much credit because for a million different reasons, because people forget about the other things. But well, yeah, in the 7 days, no one's perfect. No one's perfect, obviously.
No. I just it's just. I kind of I have more of an appreciation for Jackson, and one of the reasons is looking at Gettysburg, for example. I'm not saying what if Jackson was at Gettysburg, but just you really see how not functioning the men who'd served under him were because they couldn't. Who was it? Ewell who said, "Can anybody write a discernible order?"
Yeah.
Jackson was so just what we would say neurodivergent, that he wrote orders that were very, very specific. And for me, I need that in a manager. I need specific. What do you want me to do? I could not have Lee he would vague book it a lot of the time, I think, with orders. and leave the generals to like, well, I guess this is
Well,
what
I
he
mean,
wants us to
right.
do,
In defense of Lee, though, I mean, he hasn't been here before either.
Oh, I know. No, I
You
know.
know,
But no,
and
it's just funny.
he's
Is it like, can anybody
yeah.
write a discernible order?
You know, and he says, we're going to gather in like the Gettysburg Cashtown area. If you know the area, they're 8 miles apart, and it's tough, But that's what the order said, and someone wrote it down, and Campbell Brown's running the orders back and forth, and but again, yeah, when you're used to a certain type of thing, you absolutely want it to be done correctly. And if you're used to getting specific, if you're your job and you are having a boss who's on your ass all the time and specific, now you're the boss, and your new boss is vague, and you have a tough time with that.
Yeah.
In war, although Ewell did well at Second Winchester, though.
Yeah.
I mean, he did really well as his first corps commander. People mistakenly think that Gettysburg was his first experience. No, Second Winchester was, and he pounded Milroy, got him on the run, Mary, to Harper's Ferry.
Or
probably stopped that brewery probably on the way. That's probably what got him, actually.
That's a great brewery.
Oh, definitely is. You overlook the whole thing.
Yeah.
But I mean, well, that's the whole thing too, though. Is that there's so many different areas of how these guys had to react to it, and now you're expecting perfection historically to look back on these people.
Yeah.
To sit there and say, well, they should have done this, they should have done that.
And that's the thing with like, my opinion has changed on certain things the more I study it. That like, just because that's what happens. And, stuff that I would go into something, and this happens a lot with history. You go into something with something you think is true, and then you find out it's not. And I've encountered that with, with Howard, with looking at his letters and stuff and just reading his memoirs. I've encountered it with Sherman. You have an idea of how something must have went, and then you realize, oh, this is not, I can't find the evidence to support it or whatever, right? Charles said, I'd take Jackson at Second Manassas over Jackson at Chancellorsville, 55-mile march in 36 hours, completely around Pope's army.
Yeah. Although I think it's tough because Longstreet is a huge factor in that too.
Yeah.
Longstreet moves up, and really, he really throws a wrench into the whole. And of course, you got John Pope too. But again, do you know what? After this battle of Second Manassas, Pope wired Washington and said we won the battle and Lee's on the run. Completely lied.
Oh, did he? So he did what? What's his face? S.D. Lee did that.
He pulled an S.D. Lee. That wonderful.
Like, I won Tupelo. No, you didn't.
That wonderful moment before you tell a lie and before you get caught. Seinfeld, right? George Costanza, that buffer zone. But that's what he did. But you can make a case because of the foot cavalry with him too. But Longstreet is somebody who probably does not get enough credit for Second Manassas.
George is George.
And do you know how close
Robert
Robert Lee came to dying at Second Manassas? Bullet whizzed right by his face.
Yeah.
Skid right by.
Oh, it's like John Brown Gordon almost died at Antietam.
Yeah, that's true.
Almost drowned in his own blood. And the injuries he got there were terrible. But like, yeah, you have like, so S.D. Lee, Western theater guy, very punchable face, by the way.
It's so easy to say SDT, by the way, STD.
I know, ST. Remember you did that in the episode we had to talk about him? STD Lee. That sounds like, okay, what's his name? Van Dorn's nickname.
Oh, yeah.
DVD. It sounds like an STD. But no, SD Lee, like he loses Tupelo. We really have to do an episode about Tupelo. And then he tells everybody, no,
Elvis Presley, man.
Yeah. He's like, no, but I won. No, you didn't.
Elvis is still alive there.
Living out west somewhere.
That's what I heard.
According to a woman we talked to at Adams County Winery, we talked to.
That's true. No, that was Jim Morrison.
Oh, right. Jim Morrison. That was an interesting conversation.
No. Somebody I know went to Graceland recently. I forget who the hell it was. But somebody says he went there. And my friend Mike Martin, a non-Civil War friend, but he's somebody then. He says that Elvis is still alive.
Yeah. Frank said, just like Hood said that he pushed the Union Army out of Franklin.
Oh yeah. Well, sort of.
Well, they went to Nashville.
Yeah, they sort of did. It was kind of like, hitting people on the run and saying they pushed them out. But hey, we'll take it.
Yeah.
But again, it's all perception. It's perception versus reality. Mm-hmm. I could read quotes from Douglas Soulfall Freeman about Robert E. Lee, and I could read the same exact quotes from Edward Bonekemper. Yeah. About the same exact quote, going in two divergent stories about pluses and minuses. So
I've read that too.
What's great about history. It's all interpretive. There's no black or white. There's no superlatives, and some people don't get that, Mary. Some people hold on to positions like grim death and never let them go. But it's important that you keep an open mind. No question.
Leonard said, S.D. Lee, founder of of Mississippi State University and one of 3 park commissioners who established the Vicksburg National Military Park. I did not know that about him, about Vicksburg.
No, a lot of these guys, SD Lee, Harvey Hill. I mean, a lot of these people have a lot of poet. University of North Carolina, by the way, Bill Belichick married North Carolina, right? A lot of these guys have post wars. I mean, D.H. Hill gets hit for that lost Order 191 thing. Although he says, I got my copy right here. I know what the hell you're talking about. You can go visit at UNC and they have it in the archives, 191 order, the original one. But
I mean, I rag on SD Lee, but he does actually have a good day at Chickasaw.
No, of course. I mean, he does. That's it. I mean, it's a tough spot for Sherman to fight at. Like your mother told you, fighting and walking in the snow uphill both ways. Except it was real.
His maps didn't have terrain on them, and when he got there, he's like, "This can't happen." No,
but look, everybody has their, Grant has his Holly Springs too, so it is what it is.
Isn't that where he went on the bender and what's his face? Rollins had to cover it up.
No, that was in the Vicksburg campaign. That was later.
Oh, when he went.
That was later. That was the one with Earl Van Dorn basically just ripped the supplies up, and he was totally unaware, but he had to fall back. I think it was to Cairo he fell back to reset again, and then move down. One of those multiple attempts to take Vicksburg. But I'm glad Leonard's on here though, because I think of, we gotta do a trivia thing soon, Mary.
I know.
I think I might pick up a book. It's been so busy lately. We have a whole bunch of books from Bjorn, the Lincoln Bookshops. We have to give those away. So we have to do. We'll set that up soon. We got to do that again soon.
Remember we did the Leonard Curtis round?
Well, he's like a retired boxing champion. You have to keep. You have to like just. I think we should.
He knows the stuff about we. The other thing that's we have to do is we need to do an episode about. We need to do an episode about Bowen.
Well, no, we will. There's a lot. I know. There's a bunch of ones we still got to do. But that's what's cool about it is being able to study this stuff. And the good thing about that period is there's so much. There's so much.
And there's still so much being written as well. Like I just what was it, like where I work, I discovered a book that's coming out in February, and it's about Gettysburg. Mm-hmm. But, and I kind of was like, oh God, another Gettysburg book. But I'm like, hey, this is more research, but I'm happy to see, and Leonard mentioned that Ed Bars wrote, he's kind of the gold standard for anything Vicksburg, but now Tim Smith has kind of taken that as well, and he's really good too. But it's good to see books coming out about Vicksburg. Dave Powell is writing his trilogy on the Atlanta campaign, which I'm really looking forward to reading, because his trilogy on Chickamauga is really, really good as well. So you have books like that coming out, which is nice to see other areas of the Civil War being covered. And the Atlanta campaign, I think he's probably uncovering a lot of stuff that hasn't been published before, because nobody's really done that deep of a dive. Leonard said, I'm just going to do my own podcast and do a Bowen episode. The Gallant podcast.
There it is right there. We can definitely do that. But it's great to be able to do this, because I think the more you get I know this is a big long talk back to that guide exam question, but the more you study, guide exam or not guide exam, the better you're going to understand all this. If you really, I mean, people who are on this obviously are into this stuff more than they probably should be. But if you really want to be a true Civil War nerd, you have to read the whole thing. And of course, Gettysburg is my favorite. I know you like Chickamauga and everything that, but at the same time, I get more sort of intellectual pleasure reading non-Gettysburg, because there's only so much you can read about here. I mean, there's so much other things you can do. Plus, I mean, it's the Gettysburg is always the elephant in the room. It's always the big boy on the block.
Yeah.
And reading more about other battles, especially Antietam, will give you a better appreciation, understanding of Gettysburg.
Yeah. Well, it's and reading other biographies too, I'm probably going to, I had to put it back in the bookcase. I was going to read Jackson's biography again, just because it had been a while. And the one by Gwynn, I was going to read that one, but then we got the March to the Sea book. So I'm reading that one now. But yeah, I definitely like to get out of that Gettysburg bubble. I did read Gettysburg the First Day by what's his name?
Fonz?
Yep, Fonz. Read that one. That one's really good.
Mm-hmm.
The people on here are saying they're Bill said he's going to read more about Minty and Wilder. There is apparently a really good Wilder biography out there. Can't remember what it's called. I need to I really want to read it, but going back to Mincy and Wilder again, like those are both
See,
interesting
I'm
people.
gonna write a book. It's gonna be called Born to be Wilder.
To be
The story of him. I'm gonna do it. No, but I mean, I think it's great to study all these because you can look how things change, right? I mean, Gettysburg is July of '63, and Antietam is August of '62,
Yeah.
right? Every Union Corps commander at Gettysburg was not a corps commander at Antietam.
Yeah.
Less than a year before, right?
Yeah.
You got 6 corps instead of 7 at Antietam. First, second, fifth, sixth, ninth, 12th versus the 7 here. But you're still looking at 55,000 Union guys, 31 or so thousand Confederate guys. So you're talking about a big battle, but how things change.
Yeah.
And not just guys like Mansfield gets killed, but how things change at all. First Corps commander was just John Reynolds. But you know what's so funny about him is he gets pulled away to defend Pennsylvania at the last minute. So who goes in First Corps is Joe Hooker.
Yeah.
And you look at a guy like Burnside. He's a division commander the day before, a couple days before Antietam, right? Jesse Reno gets killed. Now Burnside's commander of the Ninth Corps. A couple of days later, he's in charge of the whole friggin' thing.
Yeah.
So how quickly things change. So you can look at how and why these people moved up in different positions, either by death or by incompetency.
Yeah.
And if in all honesty, if you look at that period from mid '62 to late '63, it is a miracle the Union didn't implode. Miracle.
There's so much chaos with changes. It's a lot like comparably on the Confederate side in the West, you have Army of Tennessee going through so many different changes, especially after Albert Sidney Johnston gets killed. You have Beauregard as we call him, and then you have like just all these different leadership changes, and the only one I think that really worked for them, I'll probably get some hit for this one, but was Joseph E. Johnston. He was the best one they had, I think, commanding that.
He was the McClellan of the Confederacy. He was the setup guy. He was the one who put it all together. He was one who was more cerebral, right?
Yeah.
But he wasn't aggressive, and that's ultimately gone. But he understood Sherman. But when you look at this, so it's fascinating to think that Joseph Hooker gets his shot at Corps after fighting in the West, right? I know before going to the West, he's out here fighting for the First Corps. He gets his shot because Andrew Curtin, the governor of Pennsylvania, wants a Pennsylvania man to defend PA against the approaching Rebs. You pull away arguably their best Corps commander. Now Hooker's in because of that experience. He gets to take over for Burnside because of Reno's death. He gets put up. So you can only imagine Lincoln. You get a job. Everyone gets a job. That's kind of how it was. And you have a lot of good guys to pick from, but also no, you don't really. And it's why you see guys rise so quickly. You see a guy like Hancock rise so quick. A guy like Howard. Howard's in the Second Corps at Antietam.
Yep. And then what happens there, it's around this time in I think it's late '62 or early '63 that you have Sigel throws his little hissy fit and he's like, well, I want more men or I'm going to resign. And Washington's like, fine, you're gone. I mean, Sigel's not a good commander, but then then Sickles gets Third Corps. Howard gets ticked, rightfully so, saying, whoa, political general, and I rank above him. I want a corps. And they're like, you can have the 11th, my friend. And that's how Howard gets the 11th Corps. Humor and History's on here. And they said that they never really thought of how fast the Corps commanders changed. And there is a question from Bill, and he asked, what's a good book to get a good overview of the Western battles? So any of our Western theater people, maybe you can help out with that. I don't know of one that would give a whole overview. I just know there's ones about Dave Powell's trilogy on Chickamauga, Ed Barrs or Tim Smith on Vicksburg.
I think Winston Groom's book on Vicksburg is a great one because he doesn't even talk about Vicksburg till halfway through. The first half is setting up how they got there. So you talk a lot about Henry and Donelson, Island Number 10, the DeSoto Canal. You talk all these things. I would go with that one. The guy who wrote Forrest Gump. That's what I would go with as a great starter for the Western theater, because it really gives you a good idea. Then if you read that one, and it gets you to the end of Vicksburg, you can probably pick up some of Dave Powell's books probably, and
Yeah,
go from
yeah.
there.
Dave, Emerging
Um,
Civil War has a lot of little books, like there may be like 100 and something pages about different battles in the Western theater, different aspects of it. I would also, there's also, and I know Caleb's read this one too, about Army of Tennessee. There's a really good book about that one too, that talks about, and that one is worth reading. It just talks about why the Army of Tennessee was so just
since
like,
you
it's a mess.
mentioned that, a good diary is Sam Watkins' Company
Yeah,
H, because speaking of Tennessee, because he gives a good. He's a southern version of Elijah Hunt Rhodes. He was everywhere in
mhm,
the West. He was everywhere. So I would go with that too from a soldier's perspective. He embellishes a little bit like they all do because
yep.
but that guy's, why wouldn't he? But those are the good ones. They give you a good flavor for it. But it's such a vast subject.
It is. It's the Western theater is like when you start studying it, like when I started off with Gettysburg and then I got into the West, it pulls you in because it is just, you realize how fascinating it is out there that they're so far removed from
yeah.
Washington and from Richmond on both sides that there are politics out there, but it's like the land of misfit toys. There's so many that are in the East that they end up going West and they do really well. And just real quick, really good book apparently about Wilder is Blue Lightning.
Mhm.
So that's a biography to read about him. And there's also one about Minty as well, I think.
What was good about the Western theater, if you're a general out there, is you're far enough away from DC
Yeah.
where you can kind of do what you want to do. We were
Yeah.
talking before about how quickly corps commanders changed in the East. That was because Lincoln, Halleck, and Stanton changed these guys like they were socks.
Mhm.
It was never good enough.
Yeah.
You have the completely disastrous decision of the Army of the Virginia with John Pope. You sideline McClellan and you bring McClellan back in again. He fights, does well
Yeah.
overall. And then after Antietam, and I think he gets a bad rap. And you can rip McClellan all you want for not attacking at the midday on Antietam when they probably would have won the battle right there. He held reserves, and I get all that. But you can't rip him for his pursuit of that because he did. He did pursue him, and he did put troops on the Williamsport crossing to keep Lee from coming back because
Yeah.
people think that, well, Lee was going to fall back from Antietam and that was going to be the end. He was just going to do a route around. He was going to go to Williamsport and go
Mhm.
back up that way. Antietam was a bump in the road. McClellan did keep him out of Pennsylvania. He gets fired for Burnside, who's the
Yeah.
flavor of the month.
Yeah.
Because thanks to the 51s, Pennsylvania, New York, they held the bridge, they pushed him back, and AP Hill came. But no, it's true though. The only time men were promised whiskey and they delivered, right? It's true.
Yep.
But so now Burnside's in charge. He gets fired after the Mud March, that whole disaster. Now
God.
Hooker's in, but Hooker's the right guy at the right time
Yep.
because he's able to reorganize the artillery, especially. He puts all the corps. He steals a corps commemorable idea from the West.
Yeah, from Kearney, but the
right,
the core badges are Kearney's idea originally.
yeah, but I mean, he does a good job of kind of McClellan a little bit. Kind of let's
Yep.
pull back and reorganize. He puts artillery in every corps and reserve artillery, which you see here in Gettysburg, which is very
Yep.
important for the Union here. But you see a lot of the stuff he did to set that whole thing up. But they had no patience for them.
No.
And you think about it, Antietam is a victory. I mean, it's a hockey shootout victory. It's a tie, but the extra point goes to the Union. Is kind of what it was. But that cost McClellan his job, and you almost saw the same thing happen with Meade after Gettysburg.
Yeah.
You have the biggest battle ever fought in the Western Hemisphere. You win, and there are people in Washington who want Meade gone because he didn't pursue and destroy. Have you let him escape?
Yeah.
But again, you're not there in real time, and
no, it's a very misunderstood aspect, I think, of the battle, and like Kent Masterson Brown does a brilliant job of explaining it in his book Retreat from Gettysburg, as well as Meade at Gettysburg. Those two books are the best books about Gettysburg, in my opinion. Yeah. Merry Christmas, Leonard.
See you, Leonard. Take care. But but I think it's true though. I think it's true. And the Confederacy also had little patience for their generals, but they had more patience. I think the fact there was a lack of continuity on the Union side, especially in the East, is what delayed this thing over and over and over again.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you basically have an agreement. You're going to fire McClellan completely. You're going to get rid of him. And then Lincoln goes, how about this? How about we put him in charge of everything?
Yeah.
And Stan's like, are you shooting me? Right. No. And so he does do well for the most part. But he finally gets pushed out, and that's the end of it. But again, they lost patience in him. And Meade was the right guy at the right time in a lot of cases as well. But you wonder how his future would have been if they didn't reorganize and they didn't pull Grant from the West to
Yeah.
kind of oversee everything. He wasn't in charge of the AOP, but he was in charge of the Army. It's kind of like having a director in your office, but you're still the boss.
Yeah.
And Meade fought him left and right about certain things.
Mhm.
You know, he hated a lot of different people. He hated a lot of the cavalry people,
Yeah.
especially.
Sheridan.
Sheridan, especially, he could not stand Sheridan to the point.
Me
where,
and I share that.
Well, you think about that for a second. And Sheridan gets a bad rap because he was a good officer. He really really was, especially later in the war.
Well, I appreciate who he was. I just don't like.
No, and he screwed a lot of people. He
Like
obviously screwed Warren, but again, how bad does it have to be? You're in the Overland campaign, and because Sheridan does not get along with Meade, you're Grant. He goes, I tell you what, Sheridan, take your cavalry and go chase Jeb. Just get out of my hair. So you're exposing yourself recklessly and frontally to Lee with no cavalry.
Yep.
You know, this is after Spotsylvania, after all that stuff. So it ends up taking Lee out of Yellow Tavern. I mean, Jeb at Yellow Tavern, but that's a ballsy move to take all your cavalry away just because of spite and because of personality. But that's why I study this stuff. These guys don't get along too well.
It's very interesting looking at, you know, that in the Civil War. And another interesting study is Beauregard, because he is the bullpen guy that never gets the chance because he does not get along with Davis. Beauregard's problem is that he was a little bit outspoken and he tended to be like, you know what? I'm just going to do my own thing here. But he's an interesting study. I think he would have been a great commander of Army of Tennessee had he. I know.
No, he was good. He was arrogant.
He got himself into trouble for that, but he gets kind of put in the corner because Davis has a personal thing against him, and that's why you have a person like Hood getting put in charge. And Beauregard, doesn't he laugh in Hood's face when Hood's like, "This is what I want to do," and Beauregard's like, "This is going to fail."
No, he literally laughed in his face when he says he wants to take his army, go through. You know, he wants to go through Nashville, take out Nashville, go into Ohio, and work his way east into Virginia. And Beauregard's like, "You knock yourself out, pal."
Yeah, it's not going to work. It's like
they buried Beauregard without his shoes.
Yep, and that's why his ghost apparently haunts.
Yeah, I guess that was done. They stuck. I don't know why they would do that, but they stuck to it. But no, but you go back. You mentioned Sheridan again, and we can have fun with him and everything he did. But I mean, he was the guy who cleared the valley. Nobody else could, though. David Hunter, no. Franz Sigel, no. So he was the right guy at the right time for that because he embraced Grant's strategy. Grant also loved him some Phil Sheridan.
Oh, God. I refer to Sheridan as Grant's little lapdog.
He was his mini-me is who he was.
Yes, exactly.
That's who Sheridan was.
And that's why, and don't get me wrong, Sheridan has brilliant moments in the Civil War. Like Stone's River, he's pretty good at Missionary Ridge. There's that funny story of him at Missionary Ridge where he's standing there with some of the guys, like the battle's getting underway, and the Confederates just start like hitting the artillery, right? And there's a cannonball that lands like right in front of him, gets dirt all over his uniform, and he yells up, basically yells up probably obscenities, knowing Sheridan. He was like, I'm going to come up and get you for that, because they got his uniform all dirty.
He has that experience. He has, everything from 3rd Winchester to, to obviously Cedar Creek and then Fisher's Hill, the whole deal. And that is going to give him a little bit of cachet. And so he's going to be part of that, the Lee's escape, going to Amelia Courthouse and Farmville, that whole deal. But again, at this point, he's like, hey, I can probably carve myself a pretty sweet post-war. This war is over. I need to be in the big chair.
Yeah.
I need to find someone who I can blame for any of my failings. And that's when he finds Governor Kit Warren and fires him, which was really, if he had not done that, I think history might have looked at him a lot differently.
Yeah.
Because I think everybody knew how spiteful that was.
Oh.
You cannot blame Warren for being delayed when he actually found battle along the way that delayed him.
Yeah.
But hey, it's like anything else. You don't follow orders. I told you to be here at a certain day. I told you to be here at noontime. You didn't get here at noontime. I'm getting rid of you. But Warren was a challenge to him.
Yep. Warren was also very arrogant as well. I mean, who wasn't really back then? You kind of had to have a bit of an arrogance about you if you're in the Army, especially I think in Army of Potomac. But like Warren just was unfairly treated to the point where did not want to be buried in a military uniform. He is buried in civilian uniform. And or civilian clothes, you want to visit a sad grave, go to his.
Yeah,
It
no,
was raining. It's just, it has this feeling of being so sad. David puts it really well. Sheridan is a shifty-eyed weasel.
well, he was an opportunist, is what he was. But here's the thing, though, is you cannot deny that he was one of the Union's best generals, though he
Yeah, he's
was.
good. He's
Because
good.
I mean, you could make fun of him for all the short man syndrome and being, you know, the guy twisting his mustache and finding a way to screw people left and right and thinking about himself. But I mean, Stones River, pretty solid. Cedar Creek, very solid. Chasing down Lee, very, very solid. Right. All that. And he didn't really have too many failings. I mean, he was a jerk. He was. Yeah. But I mean, he delivered. I mean, the Valley was something that they've been trying to clear the Valley for the entire war, and they could not do it. They could not. Well, granted, you had the great Nathaniel Banks, could not beat Stonewall Jackson, which makes sense, okay? But then you have Jubal Early going up against a cavalcade of clowns and David Hunter and Franz Siegel. But when Sheridan comes in, what happens? Right, settles the room. Yep. Right. Now I got this, and he pushes Jubal Early right up the Valley. I guess you actually not up the Valley. Yeah, let's get that backwards. But he's somebody who was an absolute. He was the guy. He's the guy in your office, okay? That your boss can say, okay, you're not getting a Christmas bonus this year, and he's going to say, you know what? It's best for the company, and it's all good. Let's look at the big picture. That's who he was. Yeah, he was a kiss ass of the man, right? But he knew that was going to get him promoted. But then when he got his opportunities, you know what he did? He succeeded. He did. Right. So figure a company man who has cachet.
Yep, that's exactly what he was. Cisco said he was a company man.
Yes, that's exactly who he was. That's exactly. But you know what though? You could say he was attacked. He was vicious in the Valley and the whole thing with Meg.
Post-war, he's not.
No, but he
upon Sheridan.
He wasn't. So. But I mean, if you're a Confederate and you're blaming Sheridan for the stuff he did in the Valley, it's like, well, you're gonna have to look in the mirror here a little bit.
Yep.
I mean, I'm sorry, you're going to have to, because that's just the reality of it. But I don't know. It's fun to study these guys because you'll never get to know them personally, but you read enough from a different bunch of sources. You can kind of do the whole Dr. Phil 101 thing, get an idea of their personalities. Yeah. But someone like Sheridan, there are people Sheridans like that, Hancocks like that. Yeah. Where you can kind of get a good idea of how they were. Because Hancock, he would lose his mind at the drop of the hat. He was like the Tasmanian devil.
I love the story of him and Hunt at Gettysburg, and Hunt's like, F you.
Well, look at Eliakim Sherrill.
You were telling me that story this morning.
Well, no, you could look at him. I mean, he's a guy who he gets arrested by Hancock and putting time out. And Hancock literally loses his mind, like Paul Giamatti in the Howard Stern movie, flipping out, right? That's who he was. Because why? Because that brigade fell back. We're talking 111th New York, 125th, 126th, 39th PA. These are the famous Harper's Ferry Coward Brigade, right? Yeah. So George Lamb Willard gets killed as they're falling back. They've already pushed back Barksdale's guys. Barksdale's shot. They're coming back, taking their victory lap. They're walking towards the Union line as Confederate artillery is coming over their head in perfect battle formation. Imagine being shot from artillery from the back and you don't even flinch. Willard gets shot, gets a shell off his right shoulder, blows the whole right side of his face off. He doesn't make it, Mary. I don't know if you know that.
That's not something you can walk off.
Sherrill takes over. He goes back, and then Hancock goes, I didn't tell you to fall back. You're arrested. He's like, what the hell are you talking about? I'm not even in charge of this damn brigade. He goes, well, you are now. You're arrested. And then the next day, the other generals go, you kind of did Sherrill wrong here. He's like, okay, I'll let him out. The next day, you know what happens? Sherrill gets killed to pick his charge.
Oh.
But again, so there's a lot of that. There's a lot of overreaction with this stuff. Yeah. And that's what happens, though. But you want to talk about someone who lost it. I mean, yeah, he was. He was probably the one who had the worst battlefield temperament in real time because of his temper. But there's a lot of guys. It's not just ripping on Hank. There's a lot of guys.
There's a lot of guys like that. Like I think Hooker could be like that too. Hooker would get really, really angry. Hooker had the tendency to blame other people. And what was I going to say? For instance, like before he left the Western Theater, Hooker made a point of running his mouth again about Chancellorsville and blaming Howard. And Howard had to write his wife and said, okay, so just so you know, you're probably going to read some really bad stuff about me in the papers. And it's because of Hooker and his people. Like Hooker's mad that I'm in charge of Army of the Tennessee now, and he didn't take it very well.
Right.
But you have, when Howard was offered that position from Sherman after McPherson was killed, the first thing Howard said was, this should likely go to Hooker because he's higher rank. And he's not going to like it if I'm in charge. And Hooker or Sherman was just like, I know, but I want you in charge. Yeah. And that was also Sherman's way of getting rid of Hooker, because as long as Hooker was there, Slocum was not going to be in that area. And that's why when you have Hooker leaving, finally send him packing back east, Slocum was finally like, okay, well, I'll come down there now. Yeah. Because he was like, he got out, apparently on the ride out west, all they did was fight Slocum and Hooker, to the point where Slocum got there and he wrote Washington and said, if you want me to remain in this army, you need to send me elsewhere. I can't be in the same room with this guy.
We're fighting over who had the better hair.
Probably. I'm going to go with Slocum on that.
Slocum had hella good hair.
That guy. He's one of, what did I notice about him? He doesn't have his hat on his monument.
He doesn't. He's holding his hand.
He's holding his hat on the side.
Yeah.
Which is real. I noticed that like one day when I was like, wow, that's really good. Like it's cool. I think. It's just,
whatever. It's all different, but seniority was everything. It's why that your boy Howard was so pissed that Franz Sigel, right, got that job, because he outranked him.
Well, no, Sickles. He was
Sickles. Right.
He was ticked off that Sickles got the job because
he replaced Sigel.
And Howard was also a West Pointer, so he was Army. Sickles was a political general, but I don't think it was anything against Sickles because the two of them were friends. But it was just this whole like, hey, you're gonna pass me over? Like, what the heck? I want Corps Command too, and that's when he was given the 11th Corps, and that was that took a while for them to mesh together. I think they eventually did, but they finally did mesh. I think by the time they got out west, because some of the guys like 73rd PA went with him. We were looking at that monument this morning. Lou mentions Bragg and Hood and Forrest all had tempers as well.
There's nothing wrong with having a temper. Trust me. Christ, that's just life in general. Yeah. But Hancock was the one who was mentioned many times as being the worst one.
Yeah. One of the, and Kevin said, "Oh, thanks for the reminder. Need to go check the status of the pinwheel."
I mean, he was from Philly theoretically, so I'd be miserable if I was from Philadelphia too. So I guess that's the way it is, right?
Well, it's really interesting reading some of the post Gettysburg letters. I've read a lot of like Howard's and how chaotic things were in the AOP, not knowing what was going to happen. Like I found, like I've mentioned before, Howard writes his wife one day and says, okay, apparently I'm going to be taking over the 2nd Corps and they're going to start dividing up the 11th Corps. And it was because Hancock was still recovering from his injury and they wanted a commander in there.
Oh yeah.
And then a few days later he said, nope, I'm going out west with Slocum.
Mm-hmm.
So it was changing like crazy. Like what you mentioned before, how quickly things would change in the AOP, but they stayed more stable. I think in the Western Theater, you had commanders, Corps, division, all that in place for longer.
Well, you did, because there was not as much pressure. They did more work in the West, admittedly, than the East.
Yes,
but in the East, you were under the spotlight. You were in the fishbowl of the big three, right? Mm-hmm. Of Lincoln, Halleck, and Stanton. So you step on, and the military conduct committee, that whole thing going. So you had a lot of that. Yeah. But again, it's one of those things where it's one of those things where you're in the West, you can say, you know what, I'm just far enough. It's like you go to college. You're far enough away from home where you can do all the stupid stuff your parents don't find out about it. Yeah. So you have more confidence. I mean, it's no surprise that Howard did better in the West than he did in the East. Same with Slocum.
Yeah, because you're away from all of that stuff. And, there was people in the AOP, Gibbon, one person did not like Howard. And a lot of it is to do with the fact that Howard is an abolitionist in an army where there's not
Well,
a lot of
there's
abolitionists.
that. The
And
thing
there's Chancellorsville. He's not like aggressive in the same way that Hancock and Gibbon were. And MJ said like a great what if is what if Howard does take command of the second and
if he does,
does
you know what happens? He takes him right the second. That's the end of it.
yeah.
It doesn't change anything. I mean, it's not like the men are going to fight any less or any harder. I mean, you've got three in Gettysburg in the second. You've got three good division commanders with Hayes, Gibbon, and Caldwell.
Yeah.
So you probably have the best three. You could probably make a case of the first corps too, but I bet you the second corps had the best three division commanders, so you were able to do more stuff.
Yeah.
You're able to break off some brigades. You're able to take Sam Carroll's brigade second to East Cemetery Hill, Caldwell's division. You get to send him to bail out Sickles. You're able to do these things while keeping Hayes guys for the most part in the middle, and that's why we mentioned before. With Sherrill. I mean, you have the confidence to move people around. You're going to take an entire brigade, send them down the line, right down Hancock Avenue over there, and go chase down Barksdale. And so you have it's kind of a mix of plug and play type thing, because you have probably the best soldiers were probably the Second Corps soldiers. First or second, you could probably make a case, nothing against the other ones, but I mean, you're looking at the people who are probably the more battle tested, right? I mean, I know the First Corps had the Iron Brigade, had all these guys in it too, but again, you have the right people at the right place. Yeah. So if you have Howard instead of Hancock, I think it's you can replace him pretty much easy way.
Yeah, yeah. Well, MJ said like she meant Howard likely never commands an army if he stays east. He likely would not have.
No, he wouldn't have. Whoever went west, whoever
was
went
going
west
to get command of
was probably going to get it. But again, Howard had a reputation of being, like we said before, the adult in the room, right? Yeah. So you're going to have someone like him on command the army and be on the march to the sea, the right wing, because you don't have to worry about him. He's not going to go rogue on you. Yeah. And that's good and bad if you think.
And that's the same reason that Slocum was picked too. It's not just because Howard went to West Point. Yes, that factors into it. And Blackjack, and Howard did say Blackjack should have had command too, but like Howard knew taking command of Army of the Tennessee was going to be an issue for some people, and it was for Blackjack. And I understand where Blackjack is coming on that, but Sherman had his reasons. But I don't agree with the people that say it was just because of West Point. If you there's a letter that Sherman wrote to Howard when he went out west, and he said, "Look, I understand what your reputation is, but believe me, I've heard more good than bad about you. I know you're a good soldier." And it was very reassuring for Howard. And he sent the copy of the letter to his wife. He was like, "I want you to read this." And I think he needed that confidence boost coming off of Chancellorsville, that he was still pretty shaky. And, Gettysburg, he still doesn't have the greatest reputation, which I wish that would change. Like he goes out west and has success, but he is on the march to the sea. And he's also, and I found this out recently, if something happens to Sherman, he's the one to take over. And that's likely why he could never get leave to go back to see his family.
Yeah, I mean, what was good about Meade was speaking of Meade too. I mean, pop my head, I've read the Philadelphia comment, but he basically, he was somebody who he was aggressive, and he was also an angry fellow too. But he was also somebody willing to listen with subordinates, right? Yes. It wasn't my way or the highway. Yeah, and that's what makes a good leader. I think for the most part, you have moments, and again, no one's perfect. I mean, Meade lost his mind at Hooker at Chancellorsville because he wanted to attack, but Jeb Stuart now is in charge of infantry of all damn things, because after Stonewall goes down, he has a chance to put him over a barrel and beat him. But Meade's knocked in the head. He's loopy. He doesn't give him the authority to do it. He loses his mind. But again, you can't blame them. I mean, put yourself in this situation. The worst moments of your life, you're in charge of real-time decisions that, oh, by the way, could determine your country's future.
Yeah, that's a lot.
I mean, Chris, I get pissed off on the Pat Stewart interception, for God's sakes. But imagine how it'll be in these situations. So give these guys a break a little bit. But I think you need a temper a little bit. But I think at the same time, you cannot let it overcome you. And you have to maintain your cool, right? Because like anything else in your real job, right? Don't freak out if your boss is being cool. If your boss is freaking out, then you can freak out, right?
Yeah.
That's kind of how it is, right?
Yeah. If the uppers are starting to freak out, then that's, when you get kind of worried. Ryan's on here said, "Good afternoon, Colonials. Merry Christmas. Santa is a red coat." I've got that great meme I post every Christmas. The guy's going up to Santa going up to George Washington is like, Papa George, what's Santa going to bring us? And George Washington responds with like, "Santa dead. He was a spy."
Yeah, damn red coats. The anniversary of the Boston Tea Party was last week, Mary.
Yep.
251.
Yep.
Dumped the king's tea into the salty sea. That was a great time last year.
That was a lot of fun.
Let me read a comment here. Do you guys ever do an episode of the Red River campaign? No, we have not, but we talked about it.
Yes, we have. Yeah.
Not a full episode. We haven't done a Red River.
Nope.
I don't think so. Nope.
I
mean, we talked about it. It was part of that 5-prong attack we talked about with U.S. Grant. This is Nathaniel Banks now going against Kirby Smith with basically 2-to-1 man advantage. And of course, Banks falls on his face against Pence.
Yeah.
But it's a good study to talk about it, though. I think it's that's one we've talked about as far as an idea. So that'll definitely be coming, of course, eventually.
Yeah.
But that's a good one, though.
Bill Etzcore mentions we get to be under Howard at Bentonville. And I was saying to you this morning when I found out the 73rd PA was at Bentonville, I'm like, does this mean I could wear my Crescent Moon Corps badge?
Yeah.
And say I'm with and just say 73rd PA.
That's up to the boss. You let him know.
Oh, I know. Have a great afternoon, Jeffrey. He said, great chat this morning.
See you later. See you. I hope your Bills lose.
Etzcore, Santa's merely an observer.
Yeah. Yeah, don't get it.
But this is like, what was I going to say? Just getting back to this whole, going west and having more success and all that. But that it did hit me this morning that because I was telling you about how long they're sitting in Savannah for, and that it's kind of crappy that Howard not able to get leave to go see his wife, right? And his kids.
Oh, yeah.
But then I realized, wait, this is because Sherman doesn't want him to go, because if something happens to him, it's Howard takes over. Yeah. In Sherman's role, which is, I didn't realize that until a while. I was reading I think it's in Southern Storm. Trudeau mentions it, that he's kind of the guy that would take over if something had happened to Sherman, be in charge of everything.
Yeah, well, Sherman never put himself in a position, though. I mean, he always nothing. It wasn't like he was Beauregard at Shiloh, or he was any of these guys, Hancock at Gettysburg, or he wasn't. He stayed out of the fray for the most part.
There was one point, I think it was after they got to Savannah, he was almost killed by a cannonball, and someone told him to get out of the way because they heard the cannon fire, and he's like, "You need to get out of the way." And the cannonball.
I mean, yeah, you could look at guys like Sedgwick. You could look at even Longstreet got shot. The wilderness. But you still, even if you're not right up front, you're still not safe. But I never really read a story where he was really in harm's way ever.
No, there's some moments on the Vicksburg campaign where he did participate in some of the recon missions that he could, he talks about that in his memoirs, that he realized after what danger he put himself in doing that, because he was going on.
Well, he went up against Claiborne, right? Yes. At Chattanooga. I mean, he got beaten up pretty good there.
Oh, Claiborne and Forrest were kind of Claiborne especially. I mean, he did not like Forrest for many reasons. I don't like Forrest for many reasons. But Claiborne was kind of like his kryptonite, that if he was going up against him, it was not going to be a good day. And I think that's kind of you're talking about how in the Second Corps, you had probably the best division commanders. I think in Claiborne's division, you had the best brigade commanders.
There's no question. There's no question.
Hiram Granberry, Mark P. Lowry, right?
Daniel Govan,
and the bishop's nephew.
Yeah, Lucius Polk. You had if you want to look at that brigade level, which a lot of people don't always do that. But again, that's the key to that. Mm-hmm. You had, and that's why as much as it's easy to rip on a lot of people in the West, that's where they really, this goes back and forth again. I know people disagree with this one about the Albert Sidney Johnson death in Shiloh, is how that affected the West, because they did pretty good with Bragg, and Bragg had his moments, but for the most part, he wasn't that good. If you had a legit guy in there to offset Sherman and Grant, how that might have changed history of the West.
Yeah.
I mean, again, Albert Sidney Johnson has that Kurt Cobain syndrome. He died young, so he never did anything wrong. But if he was who I think he could have been, it could have been a different situation. He might Rosecrans and then eventually Grant might not have had an easy walk in the West, comparatively speaking, too.
Yeah.
But again, that's all conjectures. That's Monday morning quarterbacking to say the least. But yeah, but that's why it's fun to study history. You can talk about that stuff. Have fun with it, right?
Well, I can't spell Cincinnati. I was trying to say, so Kevin said Claiborne, good Irish kid, LOL. Claiborne was in Cincinnati for a while. I think he was in like the Catholic ward, which is weird because he's Protestant. But he was in like kind of where all the Catholics were in Cincinnati, whatever area that is. Yeah, Fat Feline, I love that name. That's kind of like Mosby.
Yeah, speaking of fat feline sleeping around here somewhere, yeah.
Sherman did not have a proper understanding of the terrain at Chattanooga, so it was general terrain that defeated him too.
Yeah, I mean, he was coming off the death of his kid too, though. There was a lot that went on at that when he fought that battle, and he's lucky that he didn't get beaten worse than he really did.
Oh, but when they started running, what is it? When Claiborne started running out of artillery, wasn't he like, "Let's roll rocks down on them"?
Yeah, it's just smart. I mean, you're going up against, I think, is probably the best Confederate fighting general.
Oh yes,
right, in the entire army, and your head's not in the game. You're not really in a good position to fight. That kind of, he's fortunate he kind of got out of that. He really is. But that's
Thomas saved the day for the Union that day again.
No, he absolutely. And Hooker too, though.
Yep. Hooker with Lookout Mountain, absolutely. Lookout Mountain was like,
and don't forget about the great Peter Oosterhouse, Mary.
Yes, Oosterhouse.
He was able to cross the Tennessee River.
Yep.
Right.
Yeah, he wasn't, all because of a mistake. He was there. He was supposed to be somewhere else.
Yeah, well, welcome. That's my story of my life.
But yeah, I think, and I want to study Claiborne's brigade commanders a little bit more. Like, I mean, I know I've studied Granbury, but I want to look more at Lowry and Polk and Govan. Govan and Polk survived the war, right? Did Lowry?
Mark Lowry? Yeah, I don't think so. You know what? I don't know. That's a good question. I have to look that one up.
Let me just Google that.
Yeah, that's what for some reason I don't know. That I don't know.
Frank is going to type the answer in probably.
Yeah,
I'm just Googling it. Mark Perrin Lowry, February 27th, 1885.
So obviously he did. Yeah,
known as the preacher general.
That's right. There's a lot of when you look. I guess it's easy to look at Claiborne's guys because of what happened at Franklin.
Yeah.
Do you remember how many of these guys died? But he did survive.
Yeah. Frank did type in Lowry survived. I was like right after I said that Lowry survived. Preacher general.
Good for Mark Lowry, survived.
Yep. And then you have Governor Groven.
Groven. Yeah.
And Banbury.
Yeah, that's embarrassing.
If anybody's like, if you take a trip to Chattanooga, go to Ringgold Gap and go to the train depot that's there. That was Hooker's headquarters at one point. But they have the flag of Claiborne's division, also Hardee's Corps flying. So it's got the blue with the full moon on it. But they have these stones leading up to the flag, and they have the names of the division commander or the brigade commander. So you have Claiborne and you have Polk, and then you have Groven and Banbury.
Groven and Banbury.
So it was obviously a last minute thing, and they got them. They're like, well, we don't have the budget to fix this. Let's just put them in the ground.
Yeah, no, it is. That's something.
And Frank said he's a Claiborne division guy. I studied these guys a bit. Lucid Polk died in 64. No, I'm talking about his nephew, Lucius.
Yeah, not Leonidas.
Yeah. Lucius Polk.
Merry Christmas, go Lions. Well, you know what? Lions pissed me off last week, man. I'm not gonna lie to you. I've removed them from a possible Super Bowl champion contender because of they don't play defense. Unfortunately, their coach is kind of a rockhead, but that's okay. Beyond my point. Go ahead.
So Lucius Polk died December 1st, 1892. He was actually one of the ones that was he was one of the ones that helped get Claiborne's body moved, I think.
Yeah.
To where it rests now in Helena, Arkansas. Even though Claiborne was like, I want to be buried under that tree. They're like, let's move him.
Yeah, they moved to Helena. He was buried there in that one spot for a while. They talked that story. They dug him up like 6 months later, and he was like totally skeleton, like completely. So it's like, oh, okay, didn't take long. That son. But
Yeah.
but when you study those guys, though, you get to meet a lot. But there's a lot of guys there's a lot of guys you don't really think about. Guys like Thomas Hinman come to mind,
Yep.
right? Where they're kind of like just under that level, but it
Wasn't
was
that
so
Claiborne's really good friend?
he was his wingman.
He was the
Was
short guy, right? That had the bad temper.
Yeah, and he got in the fights in the bars, and but he was the friend who your mother didn't want you to hang out with. That's who Thomas Hinman was, a good-looking dude, but liked to fight.
Yeah.
Just one of those people. And so, but he's someone who was impactful for Claiborne's life because he was a good friend of his from
Yeah,
Arkansas.
wasn't he like the loudmouth, like you said?
Yeah,
in
he was a guy at the bar where you knew that if you going out that night, you had to watch him because there was anything that was going to happen, it was going to be him. That's who Thomas Hinman was.
He looks like he's tall, but I know he's not. I'm looking at pictures of him.
Bills versus Lions. Neither team's even get close to Super Bowl. Both frauds. It's gonna be Philadelphia versus Kansas City. I just accept it.
Yeah.
Accept it.
And well, David said poor Claiborne and Granberry got John Bell.
Yeah, that's true. That's true.
Yeah, Granberry was not walking that one off.
No.
But right through the eye.
No, and again, you talk about Franklin, and I get, some people think he gets way too much credit for Franklin, which I don't quite get that, but that's just the way it is. But it's a tough situation because you're going into a situation that is significantly more dangerous than Pickett's charge was.
Yes.
I don't want to say Pickett's charge is overrated, but it gets a lot of credit and a lot of press.
I don't like it when Franklin is called the Pickett's charge of the West, because Franklin was so much worse, I think.
Yeah.
And I mean, like you said, not that Pickett's charge wasn't that bad, but like it was bad. It was still horrific. But Franklin was something else. And I think I read somewhere, and I do agree with this, that a lot of the Confederates got there and they realized this was going to be like their Kennesaw Mountain. There was no way.
It was even worse than Kennesaw, though.
Yeah.
Because even Kennesaw with Cheatham Hill, I mean, it wasn't as many guys. I mean, Franklin was brutal. The fact you're fighting in weather like today, it's cold and crappy, but it's also miserable. It was sleet later on that night. It's a tough situation to be in. But you kind of was fait accompli. You knew that was going to be the end of it. You were going to be you were going to be that you weren't going to make it.
Yeah.
But again, sometimes you have to make those decisions. You have to fight in the front to restore your honor. We see that a lot here with George Lamb Willard. We saw with Richard Garnett. You saw with Beauregard at Shiloh. You saw with Augustus Van Horn Ellis from the 124th, the Orange Blossom Regiment. The men must see you today.
Yeah.
And sometimes you're like, you know what? This is it. If it's God's will, if I'm not going to make it, I ain't going to make it. I ain't decided today or not. So go and do your thing.
Yeah. One of my favorite quotes I shouldn't say favorite, but one of the quotes that sticks in my mind from Franklin, besides "if we are to die today, Governor, let us die like men," is never let it be said that Texans lagged in a fight. Probably some of Granberry's last words.
Well, you can always tell a Texan, Mary, but you can't tell them anything.
But that is such a great quote. You can imagine that being Granberry's last word, like never let it be said that Texans lagged in a fight.
No, there's no question about it. I mean, you're fighting. I mean, people look at the first Texas a lot, right? Here at Gettysburg, but you look at the first Texas at Antietam.
Yeah,
they had more casualties than the first Minnesota did at Gettysburg.
Mm-hmm.
I'm pretty sure, I could be wrong, but I'm pretty sure the first Texas at Antietam was the highest casualty regiment in the entire Civil War.
I think they were.
So yeah, they were hard fighting guys, all of them.
Yeah, and they were like, and Granberry was just that subordinate. I mean, Claiborne was so good, I think partly because of his subordinates too, and the men that they had under them, that they were such hard fighters. And I think Claiborne, just whatever it was that you needed to be that type of commander, Claiborne had it. He was, he's not West Point, but he's British Army. But I think his men liked them too. He was good with his men. There was that story, remember, where he had the men stole the apples and he found out, he was like, well, you can hand all these out to everybody.
Oh, and he would make them carry the railroad ties back, replace them.
But
he was here.
he participated in the snowball fight that Johnson organized, and he let his men capture him.
You can't let an Irish guy not be in a snowball fight, Mary.
What?
Trust me, my back, they live for snowball fights. You know.
Snowball.
So we should carry a wind down here pretty soon. It's already 11:30. Time flies. We
Yeah, it
got
does.
plans this afternoon, Mary. Big plans.
And well, big plans and stuff. Frank mentions there's a book on Granbury's Texas Brigade.
Yeah, no, I know, and I used to live in Texas, and I visited Granbury, Texas one time. It's a great little town.
Did you realize who it was named after at the time?
Oh yeah, oh yeah. And it was the only time I ever saw a tornado in my life was Granbury, Texas. So
Wow.
it was a good time. So
Cisco says, I wish we had that snowball fight on video.
well, if they did, there'd be a lot of questions.
What I love about that story though is it's this human side that doesn't get studied a lot. You have this guy, Joseph E. Johnson, to look at his picture, you wouldn't think this guy would organize a snowball fight. He organizes a snowball fight because they get a rare snowfall where they are. And I think it's the officers against like just the men. And so Claiborne lets himself get captured and stuff, but I think it was like a couple days, but that's how they were kind of breaking the monotony.
Well,
you know,
email Edelman. Maybe he has a picture of it. Who the hell knows? If anybody has a picture of it, it's gonna be him. So it's pretty funny. So yeah. So what's coming up for us, Mary, as we wind down on a Sunday here?
So we have our Trent Affair episode, which will be released next Friday, or Thursday evening if you're watching. If you follow our YouTube channel,
yeah.
We actually we won't be releasing
Fridays.
We don't do the videos anymore unless we have a guest.
Oh, that's right.
For sound quality, which we apologize. We are working on getting a camera. If we have a guest, we will have a video.
Somebody spilled coffee on the keyboard. No, we can't do video. No, we'll record that Trent Affair on Thursday. We'll do that, and then we'll drop that Friday.
Yep, it'll drop on all, including on YouTube. It'll just
and then we're shipping up to Boston on the weekend, Mary. So there will not be a live next week. We're not going to be doing that. So,
but that's why I wanted to get on with y'all today, and thank you for joining us. Our episode, we got to come up with some of our episodes for the new year as well. We're going to be doing a roundtable again in the new year as well. I think it's too late for us to throw it together now, but. So in the new year we'll do a roundtable. So hopefully y'all can.
And we'll do a trivia. We'll do a book club.
We'll do trivia. We'll get the book club back going for 2025.
And before we sign off, I must give my respect to the great Jeff Trundy, the manager of the Falmouth Commodores. Cape Cod Baseball League died yesterday. One of the greatest guys you'll ever meet. He was my mentor in baseball, and somebody he was a good friend. I miss him very, very much. And he's been fighting cancer, and he finally succumbed to it. So the only guy who ever told me, who coached many, many major leaguers in his career, said, it doesn't matter if these guys get to the majors as long as they're better people. And I never forgot that. So Rest in peace, Jeff. You are a great guy. Love you, brother. And we'll hopefully see you on the other side someday. But heaven got a hell of a baseball coach, Mary. Yeah. No question about it. So great guy. So go Falmouth.
Frank, new episode ideas: Buster Kilrain, New Mexico campaign, elephants in battle at Spotsylvania.
Yeah, no question.
Oh, thank you, MJ. I'm just thanks for hosting this and everything you do for Civil War. Back at you as well. Thank you for all you do. Yeah, thank you, everybody. Merry Christmas if you celebrate. Happy New Year, happy holidays, all that. We really appreciate your support in 2025 or 2024. And we got lots of fun stuff planned for 2025.
Yeah, it'll be a lot of fun. Thanks for everybody for supporting this silly little thing we started, which can't believe anybody actually watches it, but who the hell knows?
We appreciate it. I mean, what started as just a way to hang out has turned into something a lot more, obviously. And we really enjoy it, and we love all the people we've met, and just love seeing the chat, people talking, people have become friends and all that. It's really, really cool.
Yeah, definitely. So hopefully we'll talk to you all soon. We will definitely plan some stuff. We got a lot of fun stuff cooking for 2025. Yeah. So to our friends here in town, we'll definitely look forward to seeing you over the holidays. And those who aren't in town, we'll definitely see you all soon. So Mary, any final words from you, Fincheru?
Well, thanks for being the awesome co-host you are. And thanks again to everybody for supporting us for this silly little thing we do.
Definitely. And don't forget, Christmas is always, remember, too important that it's about family and friends, and always appreciate the moments you have, because tomorrow is promised to nobody. Never forget that. Yeah. Always be good to your fellow people and let them be good to you. So Merry Christmas, everybody. Happy New Year. We'll talk to you all on the other side.